Hi, this is Denise Mathew, and today I'm going to make a faux diamond ring. This is a version 2. I already have one that I made. This is a little different in that I'm using prongs. I've made one with round wire, and that's with the copper, and I've also made one with square wire. I would suggest for this project that you get the square wire, but if all you have is round, you can try it out. The project is something that you want to start after you've had some experience working with wire, and it's not something for a beginner because you may become frustrated. The one thing you have to remember about this ring is it does look really nice, and what you can get out of just wire and a crystal is pretty amazing. But it isn't going to be like something you get in a jewelry store. It will be a homemade style ring, but again, will look really well. So if you keep your expectations within reach, you'll probably enjoy the project quite a bit. So let's get started. I'm working with 2 pieces of 20 gauge square wire. Each piece is 4 inches. Half hard wire is preferred, but if you don't have half hard wire, all you need to do is wire harden the wire that you do have. So I'm going to take 1 inch approximately of scrap wire, and I'm just going to wrap it around the center of those 2 wires. And I want to have those wires side by side. I don't want them twisted. Alternately, you can use a piece of painter's tape to hold your wires in place, but I prefer wire because I find it's a little bit stabler. Afterwards, you'll be taking it off anyway, so it's not really important how you get it on, as long as you get it on and the wires are nice and tight. Wrap as many times as you think you need to keep it nice and straight and tight. And after you have wrapped it to your liking, all you need to do is trim back those extra tails. Another reason why you would use the wire or tape is because you want to have the center of your wire marked. That way you'll have, when you put it on the ring mandrel, you'll know exactly where it is, so you can have even amounts of wire that you're going to wrap around the ring mandrel, and you'll see that as we go along. The wire is exactly halfway through. That would be about 2 inches because I have 4 inches of wire. 4 inches is usually good to make between a 7 and a size 8 ring, so you can gauge it accordingly based on the ring size you want to make. So now that we have the wires together in a bundle, I'm just going to find the number that I want to use. So I'm going to start with a 7, but I'm actually wanting to make an size 8 ring. The thing about this ring is you can't make it smaller, but you can make it bigger. So it's better to start off with a smaller ring and size it up. So you want to use your scrap wire as a center, and you want to have equal amounts of wire on both sides coming up from the center scrap wire. So that way you'll have even sides on both sides of your ring. So you're just going to pull it up around the size that you want. And make sure you're keeping it nice and tight, so you want to keep that size that you've decided on. Now just take your chain nose pliers and go at the middle of the wire and just do a 90-degree angle on one side. And you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. It's important to keep those 2 bent wires as close as possible because you're going to use another piece of wire to keep them together, and that will become your prongs. If you want, you can use your chain nose pliers to push the wires together. So you have 2 90-degree angles pushed as close as possible. You want them lined up. You don't want one higher than the other. And it's okay to take it off the ring mandrel if you want to make sure the bends are perfectly angled and that they come together nicely. When you feel that you have it just the way you want to, just put it back on the mandrel. And now you're going to take another piece of wire, probably about an inch of round wire is what I prefer, 20 gauge, because it wraps nicer than the square for this part. You want to wrap all those 4 wires together using that piece of wire, and you're going to start right in the middle of the wire so you have equal ends on both sides. So just one wrap in the center, and now you're going to use your chain nose pliers to make it really nice and tight, because this is going to hold all your wires together. So I just tugged really hard as I could, and that will make all the bundle get really, really tight together, and then it will give more stability to your ring, and that other piece of wire that we have on the bottom will no longer be necessary. The tails that you have, you're going to wrap upwards with one tail, the top tail, and you're going to wrap downwards with the other. Now usually I wrap about 4 times. You can wrap more or less based on what you want to do. When you wrapped as much as you want to, you just have to trim off those tails and tuck in the wire, and if necessary you can file down any sharp bits. If you have crimp pliers, you can use those to tighten up your wrap and make it a little bit rounder. It's not necessary. If you only have chain nose pliers, you can use those as well. Now you have 4 wires on top, and you're going to spread those out. And you want to make sure when you spread them out that they're not overlapping or anything. So what will naturally happen is you'll have sort of a groove, a very small groove in the center where the wires all come out. It's important to have this groove because this is where the point of your crystal will set. To make it easier to set your stone, I like to use a little bit of glue. You can use an E6000. I'm using a GS Hypo Cement because that's what I have on hand, but I think the E6000 is a better glue to do the project with. You're just going to place your stone in that little tiny groove and let the glue dry. That's an 8mm crystal. It's also called a Swarovski Chaton. And in case I'm mispronouncing it, it is spelled Chaton. So now just have all your prongs equally spread, and now you just want to mark about 10mm out, and you're going to trim the wire at that 10mm mark. So just take a Sharpie and mark it on the wire, and then just trim all the wires. Now what we're doing is we're slowly taking wire away. We don't want to go too fast because if you do, you can make your prongs too short, and then your project is pretty much finished. You can't do anything with it. You'll have to start again. If you'll notice, the crystal is staying in place while I'm trying to trim the wires, and this is perfect because that way you don't have to keep putting it back in and gauging exactly where it is. So that little bit of glue goes a long way. Now this is the part where there's a little more detail where you need to start pulling the prongs in around your stone. Now, nothing is going to fit perfectly right on the first try, so it's something that you just have to keep working with. And I have to be honest that I didn't let the glue dry all the way, so my stone's moving more. So that's really important to let it dry all the way. If you have the patience to do that, it will be very helpful for making the ring. So I'm going to continue to slowly bring the prongs in. I can use my fingers to push them towards the stone, and I can also use my chain nose pliers. As you go along, you're going to need to readjust the prongs so that they're all on 4 sides of the stone so that it will hold it equally. Keep bending in towards the stone, and we're going to do some more trimming, so not to worry. It will look rough in the beginning, but this is just basically making sure that your stone is centered and all the prongs are on all the sides that they need to be. Now I'm going to do another cut. I'm just going to eyeball it this time. If you want to measure, you can, but what this is going to do is take it down again. It's not going to take it right down to the final prongs. It will just take it down a little bit more. And like I say, take off less instead of more. Otherwise, you might make a mistake and take off too much and the prong won't go around your stone. Gauging from what I'm taking off, I think it's about 5mm, just for your references. Now I'm going to go back in with my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to start pulling the wires closer to the stone, and it's all very gentle because I don't want to crack or harm my stone. So you're just gently pushing in the wires and kind of doing a little bit of a curve motion, if you notice, towards the stone. So you're slowly just moving it closer and closer to the stone. Again, this takes time and patience, and so the more time you take, the better the stone will look. I'm carefully just pushing the prongs closer to the stone, and because it is glued, it should pretty much stay in place as you're working, but you still have to work gently because even the glue can come out of place if you're going a little too rough. So continue curving it in and also pushing it in against your stone. Again, just taking your time to get just the right fit. Ultimately, you want the wires resting on the stone, and no space between the stone and the wires. When that happens, then you can move on to the actual final prong clip. So now everything looks good. Now I'm just going to do the final prong clip. And what that means is that I'm going to take it down so that you have these almost like little prongs that are on an angle. So you need to cut the wire on an angle so that it will rest on your stone. So the way you're cutting it is you're going to rest the tips of your cutters right on the stone and then just kind of cut on an angle. It's hard to explain, but I have some pictures of how it will look. But just don't cut straight. Cut a little bit on an angle. And that's usually achieved by making sure that the tips of your cutters are right on the stone and just kind of tilt it, I would say, just the slightest bit, maybe 40, 45 degrees. The prongs might shift when you're trying to cut them, so all you need to do is just reposition them. And the last thing you want to do is you want to file those prongs because they will be sharp because you did cut them on an angle. So what you're doing is you're actually filing the prong. Now you're not touching the stone at all. You're just keeping your file on an angle again, just to file the prong. So you're going to do all the prongs the same way, and when there's no sharp parts, you're done. Now that your ring is stable, you're just going to take off the tape if you're using it, or just cut off the wire. The last thing to do is to, if you notice it's out of shape, just slide it back on the ring mandrel. And I'm going to use my rawhide mallet to both put it in shape and also wire harden it and also size it up. You could also use a ball-peen hammer if you want, and I would use a flat side. So after I have it in shape, now I'm going to start sizing it up. It's about a 7.5, and now I'm going to bring it up to an 8. And then I do a final check, and if there's any sharp parts, I'm going to use a file just to smooth it out. And that would be your completed ring. This completes the tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.